Hello and welcome to Moving Forward, a podcast by GoodHabitz. I'm your host, Aimee Clarke. In this podcast, we make sure you get all the insights you need to build a high-performing learning culture to future-proof your organization. Whether you're an HR professional, a learning and development manager, or anyone looking to give your team a leg up, you'll learn the trends and tricks to get your people learning and moving forward. In each episode, we invite an expert or two to unpack some key statements which are designed to get them sharing their best insights. And today, we're diving into the topic of happiness, its role in the workplace, whether it can be measured, and if so, how. So to help me unpack this, I'd like to welcome Matthew and Alice. Welcome to the show. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us why you're here. I'll start with you, Matthew.
Hello, yes, I'm Matt. I'm a co-founder of the Happiness Index, and I spent the last 11 years geeking out about the data behind it. So hopefully we'll share some data today on what makes us happy at work, but also at home as well.
Fantastic. And Alice?
Hi, I'm Alice, and I've got a keen interest in people. My background is in psychology research. I've coached people for 10 years on performance in corporate environments, and personally, I've also just trained as an NLP master practitioner. So I have a keen interest in happiness and self-development and how we can help ourselves.
Oh, fantastic. Me too. And I have to say, when I got the briefing for this episode, I was just so excited about it because I'm generally a happy person. I lead a team where I really feel I need to prioritize happiness, but I feel like it's not always seen that way. So I'm really curious to get into it and see where happiness comes in. So as you know, we have some statements to unpack. So I'll kick us off with our first one, which is happiness should live where you work. And I'm going to kick this off with you, Matt.
So I'm going to use a company that I saw that did this amazing advert, and it was an advert for a shower. And they said, the advert effectively said something like where you get your best ideas. And the reason I use that example is that you can put your body into a work pattern, for example, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or a 4-day work week or a 7-day work week, whatever you want. However, you can't put your brain into that pattern. And I'll just bring Alice in, but the last point I just wanted to hand over on is that your happiness at home impacts your happiness at work, and your happiness at work impacts your happiness at home. So there are reasons to want to differentiate things. Like there's loads of great little techniques you can do, like make sure that you can't see your work laptop when you're relaxing with your children and things like that. But I think it was just a good point to establish that you can separate your body but not necessarily your mind. And there are reasons for separating as well, but we just have to remember we're not robots. And I just wanted to bring Alice in on the point around your happiness at home impacts work and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that they can be separated. I remember, I started work in the corporate world when I was very young. And I remember then it was just, you weren't allowed to feel emotions at work. You very much had to separate them. It was very much work is kept at work and home is kept at home. But I don't think that that's the case anymore. And I think it's much more acceptable and encouraged to feel your feelings at work, to be able to talk about that. And I think that that's really healthy because work and life are so integral to everything that we do. You can't separate them, but I think it's understanding how to support, how to allow people to feel, but also to be able to get done what they need to do at work and at home.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept of work-life balance. It's just balance now, isn't it?
It's just balance. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
You make a really good point because previously we had this whole work-life balance concept, and I think that's already outdated. Now it's just balance.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that can be hard to achieve. So maybe, Matt, if you want to give us some insights, how do we kind of achieve this holistic happiness considering all the things we're juggling these days?
I think one of the biggest changes is technology. So we're contactable all the time. So there's lots of good ideas around how we can be the same person all the time, but it's disturbed by technology. And I always think about my father-in-law when he finished his job and travelled back from London. I think he had an hour and a half commute, which he always talks about like there was this horrible thing. But the minute he left the office, he was off. Whereas people now, they're contactable all the time. So I think it's about starting with boundaries and then working back from then. and then working that into your culture. So as an example, just on lots of email platforms, you can send an email, but you can schedule it to send later. So if, for example, the example I would use is I do the school run every day, which is when most people are starting work. But before, I normally do a little bit of work really early in the morning, and then I stop to have breakfast with the kids and then take them to school. But I don't want someone getting an email at 6:30 in the morning and thinking, oh, I've got to respond to this. So I think working out what the boundaries are and then working out a technology plan. I think that's a good place to bring Alice in.
Yeah, I actually work with an organisation who put blockers on certain times throughout the day where no one in the company is allowed to email. So they have like protected time, because now we have so many distractions. And we're bombarded with so many different ways of people being able to contact us all the time. It can be very challenging to actually set your own boundaries. So the company just decided to do it for them, and I think it's a really, really refreshing way. And they are really disrupting in this, in this sense. They really want to make a difference, because it's very difficult now to get that balance, because we are working at work and we work at home. So the lines are blurred now, whether you like it or not. Like hybrid has forced that to happen.
And I think people do like it, because I don't think hybrid would be a thing, continue to be a thing if people didn't like it.
Yeah, but it just comes with
side.
Different challenges, right? Yeah.
It's funny because I love that the organization in that case is setting a boundary for the person, but I also feel like with this delayed delivery kind of idea, it is also up to the individual to like be boundaried with themselves and not, but of course it's easier said than done. And the other thing is when you're super engaged, and I've experienced this myself, like you're thinking about work outside of work hours, you have this idea, you want to get it down. It can be hard to be boundaried, especially when you're super engaged. Matt, what can you tell us a little bit about engagement and happiness? Because I think this has been part of your research, right?
Yeah, so the way that we would talk about that is engagement is what your brain needs at work and happiness is what your heart needs. But if that's just how we storytell it, if we actually try and simplify that, it's engagement is what you think about work and happiness is what you feel. So where that can blow some people's minds is that how you feel about something, the same thing, can be different to how you think about it. And the best way for people that are listening is to think about it in any part of your life where you have had a relationship. So it could be where you worked, it could be a romantic relationship, it could be a sibling relationship, any relationship that's coming into your head right now. You may have left that relationship. It may be you left that job. And all your friends say, why have you left that job? It's amazing. And it's like a good salary, good location. It's got all the tick, 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 tick. But you feel that is not right for you. So the reason we use the term happiness is because we believe the two are important. And going back to the point that Alice was saying earlier around differentiating feelings outside of work, that was kind of part of that distinction as well. So how someone feels and how someone thinks is really important, and there is a huge lead in to performance as well, that if you ignore emotions, it's hard for people to become high performers, because emotions effectively are data points. So all of us two of us before the cameras were rolling, we're feeling a bit nervous, and that is just because our bodies are getting prepared to do something that we don't do every day. You're hosting these things all the time, so you're chill. But that's what nerves are. They're preparing your body for performance. So if you don't have them, you're actually blocking out performance, and you can apply that to every single emotion. And one of the problems is we try to label emotions as good and bad, but they've all got an evolutionary use. Interesting.
I really love that we're moving into encouraging emotions in the workplace. But I feel like there's a line to be drawn there, or maybe there isn't. I don't know, for managers who are having to coach employees who are dealing with all sorts of emotions, what advice do you have for them? Because, I don't know, we're not therapists. What do we do?
I think we all do this, we always think that when someone tells us something, we've got to fix it.
No, I never do that.
That's what we all do.
Yeah.
And then that's where, again, like the expectation that we put on ourselves is really like, oh, if we listen to these things, we're going to have to fix them all. And it's the same on a company. You think companies who do a whole survey on how people feel, you can't fix everything. And actually all you're doing is listening. And most people, and there's a TikTok trend, I don't know if you've heard trauma dumping. You heard that phrase? And that's where people, it's like the flip of it, where people are accused of like they're just telling everyone else their trauma, and then they never give the other person a chance to share and so on. So there's a whole conversation around this. But at work, I think if something's really on someone's mind, just listening to them and being there is the start point. Because as you say, most of us are not qualified to deal with the stuff that's coming in, but we can listen. That is a starting point.
Love it. Do you have anything to add to this before we move on?
I think that supporting managers is actually really important in this as well, because the role of a manager has changed so much, even in the last few years. But, you know, if you think about 10 years ago, all our managers were really tasked to do was kind of, do the kind of admin side of managing, the process side of managing, making sure you're in on time, getting everybody's work done. But now people want a leader, a therapist, a companion. It's a huge role now. And I really think that managers are the missing piece of the puzzle to everything. They're the people that have the main contact with employees. They're the ones, with their ear to the ground. They know what's going on. Give them the support that they need to be able to tackle these new challenges and to be able to show up for their teams, and not in a fixing way, but in a, like, we're here together, like, let's get through this together kind of way, that collaborative sense.
Yeah, for me, that resonates. If I think about at least the way that I want to be a manager, it is all of those things. And I think we can only hope that there are most managers out there taking it on in that perspective, because I think we still have just a lot of managers and not a lot of leaders, and it is a difference. Very, very clear. We're going to move on to our second statement, which is happiness isn't a KPI. Now, this I find interesting. KPI meaning key performance indicator, if people listening don't know. How do you look at this, and should it be, shouldn't it be?
So could
it be?
I think where the confusion, the issue comes with this statement is where a metric becomes a target. That's where the issue comes from. And let's use the medical world. Let's take heartbeat. Heartbeat is a really good thing to measure to understand the health of a human being. Happiness is a really good thing to measure to understand the cultural health of an organization. But once you make certain metrics a target, take your heartbeat, say you wanted it high all the time, that's not good. And the same with happiness. It's supposed to go up and down. What we want to do is create an environment where people can be happy and there's not misery everywhere. But what happens is when you set a target of happiness, what you get is people going, Alice, can't you just cheer up?
Yeah.
Like that's what happens. And then you end up in this like toxic positivity era where it's almost like you're forced to feel like happy and like
happy or else.
Yeah, and you may have like something serious may have just happened in your life, and suddenly you've got to put on the smiley face. And there's definitely a link to mental health and putting that mask on as well. So I would say on happiness, it's an exceptional metric. It's a really poor target, and we want it to go up over time. But you learn as much from unhappiness as you do happiness.
You mentioned a term now, cultural health, I think. Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit more?
That's a good question. It's just thinking about the things that connect everyone in an organisation and thinking about it as healthy. The best way that I imagine it in my head, because I love the natural world and farming and plants and gardening. If you think of it, you think of all your employees as an ecosystem, and your job as a manager is not to basically go around telling all the plants to grow. It's about making sure they've got all the ingredients, and that's what the cultural health is. So, if we were a team and you are our managers, you can't make us happy. You can't make Alice happy. You can't make me happy. But what you can do is provide the ingredients. And we're going to come back to talk about one of the ingredients later, which is just linked to learning. But there are all of these ingredients that we need. And so just like plants, we need all these little things. And it's a job as a manager to provide the ingredients, but someone may still be unhappy.
I think you've just said something that I really needed to hear. You can't make your team happy necessarily. You can just provide the environment. That's really helpful. I think some of us try a little bit too hard to do that. What have you seen with organizations you've worked for?
I think it's a tricky one, because I think that, especially for me growing up, happiness was something that you aspired to be. So everyone was like, oh, I just want you to be happy, you know? So like that was kind of instilled into us, that was a destination. So what I see in organizations are kind of newer managers and leaders coming in who are, you know, well-versed in the ways of the world now. And, you know, we kind of don't see happiness as a destination anymore. We understand that happiness are moments in time, and that the more you understand like what kind of makes you feel happy, the more you can do with that. But it isn't like something that plateaus and you feel all the time. Whereas you have old school managers who maybe don't have that view. So I think that the kind of challenge at the moment is being able to help people understand and help managers understand in organizations that there is a difference, and that isn't something that everybody should be aspiring to. So again, it's like that education piece. But I think that what I've seen that I love the most is an increasing conversation. So metrics are great, stats are great. My head is not numbers, my head is words. So what I love most is hearing when clients and organizations are really taking the time to hear what people are saying. So that's whether that's taking things that people have written in employment satisfaction surveys. I know that an organisation I work with do focus groups where they like to hear from people around, like, you know, lots of different variations of roles, so different hierarchies, to really find out what people are saying, you know, how they really feel, like doing vibe checks, things like that. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I've noticed more of. So yes, there are things that you can look at the stats and it's a really good indicator, like you said, but then actually having those conversations, regular conversations, I think that's where you really learn a lot about what's happening.
And they can be really hard conversations. I've been a part of similar conversations recently that were hard but so rewarding and so necessary. And then you just saying, as we were talking about, it doesn't seem like it's happiness the destination, you know. What I'm getting from what you're saying is it's really sort of about being allowed to express the spectrum of emotions and being heard in that.
Yeah.
And I think conversations are super helpful for that. But Matt, I'm curious to hear more about metrics themselves. If we were to measure, what would we be looking at?
Yeah.
How would we approach it?
And there's a really good saying for this, which is data is the plural of anecdote. And that's and what Alice is saying is the exact right starting point, which is data is just a collection of all the conversations and put together to create a mega trend so that people can see what's going on. But if you just specifically, we're talking about happiness, what makes us three happy will all be different, and what makes every individual in your team will be different. But there are mega trends, like, for example, relationships. So relationships is the number one driver of happiness. It's a need that we all have. But where the great managers and leaders come in is they're doing what Alice is talking about, which is they're having conversations about what is important to that individual. And that doesn't and shouldn't stop. The data just allows, if you've got an organisation of 1,000 people, to collect all that data and then hyper focus on the areas that are not working at the moment. And you see it changes from organisation to organisation. Like what is working in one company may not be working in the other. And a classic one that is free for everyone that organisations get wrong all the time is acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement?
Which is like, thank you. Which is like, and again, it has to be heartfelt, because you could set up, going back to technology, you could set up an email to send your team every Friday that just says, oh, I just want to say how wonderful you are this week. Quickly, that's not heartfelt. But actually taking the time to acknowledge people is really important. But then going back to Alice's point, of all the metrics and all the data points on happiness, acknowledgement has the highest standard deviation. What that means is, of all the things, so the highest ranking is relationships, but it has a low standard deviation. So what us three seek for relationships is quite similar. What we may seek from acknowledgement is very different. So the biggest mistake I ever made in that area is I did a public shout out to our CTO for a software upgrade that he managed expertly, and he hated it.
Not what he
hated
wanted.
it. Worked for him for 15 years. I know now. I know the data. I know generally this person, and I still got it wrong. What I should have done is gone for a coffee with him. I should have just gone for a coffee and said thanks. That's one-on-one. So even when you've got the data, you've got the stories, you still get it wrong. That's okay. But then when I got it wrong, I knew, and having the data and the story and connecting it helps me learn, so that I can think, right, next time I'm about to do this, I need to be thinking, right, what works for Alice, rather than because what most of us do, and I do this all the time, we tend to manage and lead the way that we would want to be managed and led, rather than the way the team would want to be managed and
we
led.
forget all the time. I think we assume that people are like us and they want what we want, obviously.
Yeah.
Classic mistake.
Yeah, actually, we're all looking at the world from our own lens, and we've all got different experiences. It's like trying to work out somebody's acknowledgement language, like as opposed to love language. Yeah,
Totally.
I feel like we should maybe develop some kind of test for this. What's your acknowledgement language? I think it should happen. That's your next project.
Thank you very much.
Pizza is mine if my manager's listening.
Yeah.
Noted. What you mentioned, something that organizations gets wrong is acknowledgement. Do you have any other kind of classic data points for us to learn from?
I think the other one that's in there that it's really bizarre, because relationships is something that people talk about all the time, and you can feel it yourself when it's not. It's the thing, like if you're not speaking to someone in your life that you spoke to before, in your private life that is deeply unsettling. But we're not very good at navigating that at work, because again, we've got this whole like, what bits of should we share, what should we not. So I think relationships is the one. Lots of companies do it naturally, where they just happen to be good at it because maybe their leader has that personality. But some companies where they don't, it's really, really hard to actually go, relationships are poor, let's make everyone get on really well. It's not easy.
How would you even do that? And maybe you've got some stories that you've seen in your work. How can companies go about fostering relationships between their employees?
I mean, how long's a piece of string? I think it depends, like what industry you're in. I think that it depends, what the actual general culture is like. But it's tricky. But it's something that I think. What I've seen that's really interesting is people looking at the root cause. So just trying to fix things like from the surface, or like trying to force different people together, make them do the same thing, like that doesn't really work. Companies who actually are trying to work out what's going wrong, where the disconnect is, seem to be making headway. And the theme that I see that works again and again is unity, is bringing the whole company together for, working on the same values, for example. So you're not tackling everybody exactly the same way, but you're all reminded of like the same mission, but you're allowed to tackle it and get there differently, but you've all got the same
direction,
you've
kind
all
of.
got the same direction. Yeah, so it's, companies that I see that are really siloed, that can be really prominent and lots of negativity there. Whereas companies that are really trying to bring everybody together to really strengthen the workforce, it does seem to be making a difference. So it's that collaboration, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this theme of sort of siloing comes up so often in these conversations because there are so many reasons for it, and there's so much damage that gets done by it.
Yeah.
So it's just always nice to have this reminder, like break down your silos, do what you can.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to our third statement, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, and that is learning is the forgotten key to happiness. What do you have to say about that one?
So I'm going to drop a couple of things in, then I'm going to hand to the expert here on this. But I just wanted to build on the last point and bring it forward, that the starting point, because Alice used the thing about direction, the point about direction, the starting point is always psychological safety.
Yeah.
So you cannot, all of the other nice stuff that we've talked about, and learning and development is one of these, we can't get that. We can't, and none of this is going to happen unless people feel safe. And learning, which we'll come on to, is a huge part of that. You're not going to be able to learn if you're in fight or flight and you're panicking for yourself, because the part of the brain that you need for learning is linked to the prefrontal cortex and creativity. If you're in fight or flight and you're scared of your manager, you're basically in the instinctive part of the brain. So I'm going to now hand to Alice, because I just wanted to say that psychological safety, although it's not the top driver of happiness, is the starting point. And we'll come back round to talk about some stuff on learning development data. But I think you're the expert on this question.
I love this question so much, just because it's so personal to me as well. But we are designed, we are literally hardwired to evolve. And so if you are feeling stuck, lost, stagnant, there's a reason for that, and look at what you're not doing, because when you're learning, it can provide such feelings of happiness. It's crazy. I mean, I literally transformed my life because I discovered self-development, because I discovered that you can change the way you live your life with self-development, and you can change the story that you tell yourself, you can change the story that you tell people. And when you discover that that's a possibility and actually start working on yourself, then your world around you changes. And I think that that's so exciting, and you do unlock new levels of happiness that you haven't felt before. So for those that maybe don't know self-development, it's such a privilege to be able to offer people ways to learn. And if you don't let people know in your organisation how they can learn and what you've got available, you're doing them a disservice, because you're like gatekeeping something that could literally change their lives. At work, this could change the whole entire trajectory of the organisation. Like, it's just huge. And yeah. Sorry, I could go on about this for ages.
No, I love it. I love the powerful, because I feel the same. And when you started off, you said, if you feel like you're stagnant and something's not right. I've had this,
all feel like it at times, right?
Yeah, I mean, I when podcasts started really flourishing, I remember just being so stimulated all the time, because you could just learn so much, like always, about anything on the train, on your bike, whatever. And sometimes I'll drop out of listening to this for a while because I'm spending more time thinking or reflecting, and then I'll start feeling a little bit like sluggish, and I'm like, oh, it's because I haven't learned anything new in a while. I've been digesting, and I think that's also important, reflecting and digesting, but I haven't, now it's time to stimulate again. Yeah. Let's go. And you also mentioned the word privilege. And I think it's a privilege to be able to offer it, and it's a privilege to be able to learn. Yeah. And I think it just frustrates me to no end when there are organizations that have this offer, and we have this and we have that, but they don't actually communicate about it very much. They're just really short-changing their employees quite a bit. Yeah. But I feel like our listeners don't need to know that. They're hopefully experts at that already.
Yeah.
I would like to add something in for your listeners, though, because I host a lot of HR brunches on not on learning, but I just sit there and listen. And one thing that I have noticed as a trend is lots of people in the HR profession, it's been a tough few years. And I've seen as a trend people to start learning outside of work, which has driven energy inside work. And the examples were, there was a HR director who had done a lot of dance when she was younger herself. She hadn't done much dance, and now she's teaching dance, but she's had to learn how to be a dance teacher. So it's not necessarily reflected, it's not necessarily to do with her day-to-day work, but going back to Alice's first point about we're hardwired for this, our brains all the time are looking for opportunities to learn. And Google did an amazing thing where they give their engineers space to just learn whatever they want, and go and work on crazy projects and things like that. So primarily we're talking about it from a work perspective. And again, I think we've fallen into the trap of making the distinction between work and home, because what that trend that people have been discussing, they're saying is making them better at work. So stuff they're doing at weekend, learning at weekend is helping them at work.
I've actually seen it in my own team, because I have somebody who's super engaged with her fitness and became a gym instructor, and is having to learn a whole new skill set of talking in front of an audience and getting them to all do the same thing, and all these things that she's not doing in her day-to-day job. And I'm super encouraging of it, because it's just learning in general. It's good for you, and it can only benefit us as a company if she is also stimulated and happy.
Absolutely.
So it works for me. I do want to just touch on one thing that maybe we haven't made super clear yet, and that is, why does it matter to be so happy at work? Or should we say, for the organization side, why should businesses care? Because I have a story for you. I saw a qualification, I would advertise a qualification to become a workplace happiness consultant. And I was like, this looks like something I would love doing. And I told my mom about this, and she was like, I would never hire you because happiness is a choice, and the companies aren't responsible for it. And I was like, damn, I mean, I see where you're coming from, but that's a bit rough. So why should businesses care?
So your mum's kind of saying what I'm saying, which you can't make someone else happy. You can't make your wife happy, you can't make your husband happy, you can't make your children happy. I don't know that role, but it goes back to if that workplace consultant is working on the ingredients, then
it would be, yeah.
if they're going around saying to everyone you need to be happy,
Oh,
then
no.
it's not going to work. But I just want to bring one of the points Alice was saying earlier about silos, and again the difference between engagement and happiness. If you have a workforce where people are happy but not engaged, because happiness gives you energy, so people are running around in circles without direction. If you have a workforce where people are engaged but not happy, that's where you get silos. So everyone knows the plan, all the kind of, but everyone is out for themselves. When you get both, which is like the brain and the heart, which is where growth happens, and that's why you need learning for happiness, is that's where you get a thriving culture. But you can't do that without both. So you need happiness and engagement. So I would say your mum's right. However, what I would say is, I think we're really just talking about language. And if you go back to ancient Greece for a second,
Sure,
which is, they would have used a word called eudaimonia, which is your underlying state of happiness. They would have used another word called hedonism, which we all know today, which we translate generally as joy. And that's where the confusion happens. So if you go to a festival, you're seeking joy in hedonism, but it's not going to impact your underlying happiness. It's going to give you like a burst of energy in that particular period of time. Spending time building relationships is going to make you happy over time, but you're not going to like say to someone, oh, can I be your friend? And then you're going to be happy. Whereas you could go to a festival and seek, and joy can happen quickly. So it's a long-term thing.
Yeah.
Just blew my mind. I love that. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think that I agree with what you said. When I first heard it, I thought, wow, that sounds like an amazing one. But also I thought, it needs to be done right, because if it's just somebody brought in, like, to like clap the hands and, try and like make everybody happy and create a happy culture, it's like without working on the root cause of what's making people unhappy, then it's not going to work. No, it's not going to work. And I think that, Matt, what you were saying about people kind of needing direction, that's so true. And what I'm actually noticing a lot in organizations now is a move from just giving people stuff to learn, giving people like development opportunities just for the sake of it, like really focused and meaningful development opportunities. So breaking down skills, so looking at the different skills that people have within their roles, the skills that are needed within the organization, especially looking at the future growth of the organization and where those skills gaps are, and allowing people to learn based on their skills gaps so that they can then have that direction. And that's something that, like, whilst I know it's been talked about a lot and it's not a new concept, it's not something that I've personally seen many people really take seriously and work on, whereas I am working with loads of organisations at the moment that are really breaking it down, and they are creating pathways, like learning pathways based on these skills. And then people have that direction, they know what they're aiming for, and all of a sudden that promotion or that, a future within the career does seem possible. Like, you understand the journey rather than just hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think it sounds like it's creating meaningful sort of learning moments with direction and clarity. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, but if you talk about engagement, having a clear path forward is a super quick way to get people locked in.
Yeah. Two things that sit in engagement. The one people can guess, one people don't always. So one you've mentioned is clarity. Within clarity sits information flow. We get information flow wrong all the time. We send out too much information or too little information. That's a classic thing. But the one that people confuse, because they sometimes think happiness is a fluffy thing, and purpose often gets put in the fluffy bracket as well, rightly or wrongly, organisational purpose. But purpose actually sits in the engagement piece because it's linked to direction. And I think this is a generational issue that's happening at the moment, because there is a U shape of happiness. If you plot people's career happiness, it's on a graph, it plots like a U. 18 happy, 65 happy, my age right at the bottom, okay? That's effectively if you plot it.
Okay, and why is that?
And it's a mix of things, as in you may have particularly my age, you may have aging parents that you are supporting, and you may have young children, and your career is maybe starting to get some like interesting stuff happening, and suddenly all those things happen at once. And that sits there. But this is a really sad thing to share, that you is breaking down for the younger generation, 18 to 25. So traditionally that's been one of the happiest points of careers, but it's actually dropping out. So the U looks, I don't even know what you describe it. It's like and then round and up. But the problem I think links back to purpose, because there are leaders and managers that are still in businesses now that don't think that stuff's important. They think like, well, they should just do their job. That's what they're paid to do. Where you can have that view, and you might find some people that do that, but I think it's just much more exciting to try and align the individual's purpose to the organization's purpose. And that's where learning and development and training comes in, because if you know where someone wants to go in your organization and you align that with personal development, you can actually start to impact that and bring back the you, because it should be when people are really enjoying work.
Yeah. I've actually worked with an organisation who managed to, he's very interested in stats, and he managed to show a correlation between how long people were spending on learning and their own self-development and the high performers. And it was very clear that the high performers of the company were spending vastly more time on their self-development. And I think that leading back to what we were to what we were talking about with the skills and allowing people to have that direction in their development, that is something that you can measure as well. You can measure somebody doing things better in their role. And so that's exciting for everybody, because then people actually see progress. And I think that that's important, to actually see that you're making headway with something, because then, again, it's that collaborative. Everybody feels like they're all working in the same direction as well.
Yeah. And seeing progress is super duper important. And
to our motivation.
And some things are easier to see progress in than others, but that's also, I feel like, where acknowledgement comes in, because you can literally acknowledge someone's progress, because maybe they don't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
We have to move on. We could go on forever. Super interesting. Let's move on to our last statement for now, and that is, in 5 years, every organization has a chief happiness officer. What do we think about that?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen. But if we just say for a second, you're the best podcast host in the world, and there's someone out there who has a podcast called Stephen Bartlett, who's currently hiring for a chief happiness officer. So this has created loads of conversation.
Is he actually?
Yeah, he actually is, as we
Diary
stand.
of a CEO, this one.
Yeah. So they are hiring for now, and it's pitched out there as the best job ever. But I've seen this trend happen every 2 years. It kind of like becomes exciting, and then people pick it up and drop it. And I think it's like talking about happiness at work fluctuates almost like a fashion. Like sometimes it's like really on trend, and sometimes it's not. And the people like us, we're trying to do like the deep work underneath it. Sometimes it's good because it shines a light on it, but sometimes it's just a papering over the cracks and a rebrand of just the same job.
Yeah.
So if the job is fundamentally, and I'm going to bore everyone by making the same point again, if the job is focused on the fundamentals of the culture underneath and creating a great environment, then I'm all for that. Yeah. If it's for just getting a fancy job title and getting more people to apply for the job, I'm too bored of that. So I don't think it's going to happen, because there is, as someone who works in happiness, there is still such a deep-rooted sense that this isn't a businessy thing, and it's going to take a long time to shift. So Aimee Edmondson, who's the person who coined psychological safety, had a talk with her the other week. She wrote and studied and went around the world trying to convince people about psychological safety. It took 15 years for it to first get acknowledged. And she was talking about like the 80s and 90s at this point. Yeah. So I think you'll see a few like things in the headlines, but will it change? No, but I only want it to change if it's actually built on the fundamentals rather than this sounds good, so let's put it out. Yeah.
I think it links back to that toxic positivity as well, and my fear is that it's the magic pill, like everybody wants to take the magic pill to lose weight, like rather than to like do the actual hard work and work out what their diet needs to look like and what their exercise needs to look like and that happy spot for them, and that but I think that if that's what's happening, then I don't want it. And I don't think that it's what anybody wants, and it's not going to be the change. But if it's somebody who's going to manage, let's rip apart the organisation from the bottom and look at what's going wrong where, and what people are actually unhappy about, and where can we make changes, and how can we make that really transparent. Then great, like let's all get chief happiness officers.
It's that ecosystem, right?
Yeah,
It's exactly that.
yeah.
I would totally apply for a job as a chief happiness officer. Now knowing that it's about, giving the ingredients, not pasting a smile on things, of course.
And it is.
If you were like free reign, you can like go and like basically like, pick apart our organisation and like, let's do this from the bottom up. Like, let's just do like a one like sweep. Let's get it right. What an amazing job. But do you think that's what it is?
No, and I'll tell this person that I'm about to share their story because they're a friend of mine, but they came up to me the other day and they were like, I'm doing happiness at work, Matt. And I was like, what's this? And what they did was amazing, right? But it's not what we do, which is they'd booked loads of dogs and puppies to come into the office, which is brilliant, right?
I mean, I'm all for it.
I'm all for that. I'm not anti
all for
that.
that.
I'm not anti that, but that's what they think that I do every day.
Oh, yeah.
And
No.
I don't even know where I think I'm just going on a rant now. I think there's that what people think it is versus the science. Going back to your point about ecosystem, there's a point when everyone just thought you just chuck all the crap in the rivers and the seas and don't worry about it. It's not going to have an impact on the ecosystem until you start realising you drink the water downstream.
Yeah.
That's what the culture stuff is like. Unless you're fixing it, it's making people ill downstream.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love this. We touched a little bit on psychological safety earlier. I'm pleased you'll know that we have a new lesson out on psychological safety featuring Aimee Edmondson. We actually got to interview her.
Well, I will. Hero's a strong word, but she's my hero.
No, she's fantastic. And you're right. She's been researching this since the 90s.
Yeah.
And one of the questions is, well, why has it still not happened? Why do you think why is it still seem to be such a undervalued side of culture?
I think it comes down to, in the past, the workforce was less flexible and we didn't have things like WhatsApp, LinkedIn and so on. So in the past, you could be a leader of a factory or leader of a company, and if the people weren't happy with it, tough luck. And then over time, you could move to another town, you could move to another city or whatever. But the power has primarily set with the company, but the power balance has shifted because of technology, because 4 of your employees could set up a WhatsApp group tomorrow and start their own organisation that's similar to yours. And the technology to do that has changed the balance. So psychological safety has always been important, but the balance is shifting. And what's happening at the moment, a lot of CEOs are going against that shift. So like the push of people back into the office. I'm not anti people back in the office, by the way.
But the way it's communicated can be very
And it's just like, it's the power dynamic on it. But if you think about it from a competitive perspective, all the best people in any workforce get to choose where they work. So they're going to choose where they're getting all the things that they want, which means you're left with you're not getting the best talent. As you play that over the business performance, the companies with the best talent are going to outperform. So I think, unfortunately, it was always a thing. We always needed it. But the power balance of like, I'll just fire those people if they don't do what I say, has shifted. And it ebbs and flows with the economy. So that power does ebb and flow, but the trend is going to be more flexibility.
Yes, and I imagine it would also sort of change with like perceptions of job security and that kind of thing.
So that's the ebb and flow.
Yeah.
But the overall trend is going to be, if you ignore that, you're not going to attract the best talent.
And I think this is really driving home the point of why does it matter to have happy people at work? And you mentioned it's performance, it's talent retention, it's all of these kinds of things. The business case is very, very clear.
Yeah.
It should be a priority. We're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. I could go on. But do you have anything you wanted to add to this topic of sort of psychological safety, happiness, roundabout?
I think just to remember that everybody is different. We can't expect the same from everybody. And if you want people to be happier at work, and if you want managers to lead better at work, and if you want the organisation to be better and there to be a nicer culture, then you need to look at where the problems are, and pasting things on top of it aren't going to help, but really thinking about what people need and giving them real opportunities to develop and grow their skills. That's where you're going to see a shift. It's really treating people as the humans that they are and the individuals that they are, and taking that time to do that from the bottom.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you, last words? Do you want to share last takeaways?
I would just say as a non-learning development person, the way that I see it from the outside is that it's a basic human need.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to be happy and engaged unless you have learning opportunities in your organization. And if people are not happy and engaged, they're not as productive, they're not as creative, and the companies don't perform as financially successful. So that would be my summary.
Brilliant, love it. Happy and engaged. Yeah, the thinking and the feeling, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think for me, the big takeaway for me is really about that ecosystem. And for all the managers out there that are trying to make their employees happy, it's about giving them the ingredients, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening in on this episode of Moving Forward. If you learned something new today, please share this episode with a colleague or a friend. And while you're at it, give us a review. This helps others to find this podcast and might help them move their people forward too. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.